If
Yeah.
you will, just give us a little bit of maybe like just a background into you, like who you are, why that's relevant, and then also give us a bit of a, to start the story, like wherever you want to start in terms of the kids and the situation that you found yourself in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Ian. I'm 57, a young 57. I'll have you know. Interior architect by profession. And I'm also involved with the Free Folk Project. Um, and yeah, in terms of the the reason for the journey that I'm on really is the fact that my now 24-year-old daughter, at the age of 6, disclosed that she'd been abused by my father-in-law. Um, and as a father, that was not an easy thing to take. Um, Even when it, first surfaced and Gemma first disclosed, I was very much right. Let's get something done about it. And of
Yeah.
course, to get something done about it, you've got to open up about it. You've got to talk about it. Um, Whereas Rachel was very closed initially to
Mhm.
talking to anybody about it. She was part of that controlling environment growing up. So,
Mhm.
you know, I,
Yeah, of
I
course.
I understand that. At the time, we went to the police, and um, the police failed us as a family because they made a very basic mistake, which meant that we wouldn't see what we would consider justice being served.
Mm.
Effectively, he got away with it because he was given a warning at a very early stage.
Mm.
And here in the UK, a caution, an official caution, a warning is classed as a punishment for a crime committed. So therefore, they weren't able to take him to court and effectively try him for a crime he'd already received a punishment for. Double jeopardy is one of the oldest laws. So we were stuck. We were stuck in this dark place. I collapsed after 6, 7 months later. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, um, which weirdly enough, I even felt guilty about that because I felt that kind of label was reserved for people who fought in combat and lost colleagues around them and things like that. But yeah, evidently, it's not just that. After 13 years of this man walking free, um, our son found himself in a very, very dark place, literally suicidal. And my wife had to talk him down from a bridge. He was going to jump onto an active motorway. Um, and shortly after she managed to talk him down, he then disclosed that actually it had happened to him before it had happened to Gemma, and the abuse when he started saying no, the abuse moved from him onto his younger sister, Gemma. So we managed to get him some counselling, and following that process of counselling, he felt strong enough to go to the police about it, and that then enabled um, the police to effectively reopen the file And following on from that, Rachel's sister came forward as well to the police. And after a period of about 18 months, he was had to appear in court and faced 8 charges. He pleaded guilty to the two for Rachel's sister, um, safe in the knowledge that it was pre 1972, and pre 1972, the um, the repercussions of the offences were much lower. So they carried prison time, but very much lower sentencing pre 1972. Um, and then he pleaded not guilty to 3 charges for Gemma and 3 charges for Angus. To this day, I don't know why I was because Rachel and the kids were material witnesses. They weren't allowed in any of the court proceedings, um, but I was, because I wasn't a material witness. Um, so I attended every hearing, and the judge was furious with him for pleading not guilty. This judge was very emotive, made it very clear that he'd read all of the documents relating to the case, and strongly advised. I mean, the exact words were, "I strongly advise you to change your plea, because um, if at the next trial you appear in front of me, I'll throw the book at you." Um, and made no bones about it. And he again said not guilty. And then the judge turned to his solicitor and said, "I strongly advise you to speak to your client, um, because if it were down to me, I'd be adding charges of wasting the court's time as well." For whatever reason, he decided to plead not guilty, and put his family through a week's trial. Yeah, 21st of November, county court. It happened, and I watched the video interviews of both of my children, um, and then they had to appear in the court and be cross-examined. It's probably where I'm going to start getting a bit emotional. As a father, I had to see things and hear things that no father should ever have to see and hear. But one very pertinent thing, with Angus in particular, was um, the the police interviewer, had asked a number of questions and then said, "I'm just going to leave the room and go and check with my boss, basically, to see if there's any further questions that need to be asked." And she left the room, and Angus fell apart. Um, yeah, on full view to the court, the jury, everybody. He just completely broke down, and that really hurt me quite, you know, quite badly. Then when it came to the cross examination, he just grew and grew and grew and became so strong. Um, as a father, as distressing as it was to hear about the abuse firsthand, I was just full of pride because of how handling it. Gemma, on the other hand, was much more vulnerable, um, and the abuse that she suffered was many times more, and included attempted rape, and which for a child that's between 4 and 6 years old, that's just shocking as much as anything. Um, a fully grown man, your grandfather forcing themselves upon you. And then when it came to his interviews, there were basically they'd edited it down to 6 hours, um, and he refused to admit to anything to do with Angus, on the basis that he wasn't gay. Um, the fact that this is a child, there's no sort of gay or straight or anything. When you're dealing with children, it's a totally different kettle of fish. He just undid himself. There were so many contradictions in there. It was ridiculous. But the one thing that really stuck out for me was the fact that he referred to Gemma as a very sexual girl, um, and basically she was in charge and she knew exactly what she wanted. You could hear the incredulity in the officer's voice. Uh, he literally couldn't believe what he was hearing. So he asked the same question again, but phrasing it differently again. And he said the same thing, must have been 3 or 4 times, that she wanted it. I just that just beggars belief. Um, I'm so glad that Gemma never saw that, um, because after she was examined, she would have been able to sit in the public gallery like Angus did. Angus came and sat in the public gallery after his interview, his session on the stand, and Rachel came up as well. But I'm so glad that Gemma didn't see his video, because what he was saying would have destroyed her. At the end of it, on all 8 charges, the jury took just 80 minutes to decide, and came back with a verdict of guilty on all counts. Um, and the sentencing was the following day, and he got 30 years, um, and then died in jail, in prison, less than a year later,
Hmm.
10 months later. A father has a couple of jobs, if you like. It's part of the job description. One is to protect your family, and another one is to provide for them, and um, keeping them safe is absolutely number one priority. And from my perspective, I'd abjectly failed to do that. But the fact that we were invited down into the courtroom for his sentencing, sat there with the jury immediately to our left, who every single one, um, every single one of the jury members made full eye contact with us, and recognised what we'd gone through as a family, and how tight we were as a family, and how much we loved each other. Um, but when each charge was read out, and then the sentence relating to that charge was read out, it was pure joy, um, for Gemma in particular, had lived for all of those years in the fear that he was never going to see justice. And obviously, evidently, the same with Angus as well. But none more so than me and Rachel. Uh, and it that moment was relief. And for me, that was when I thought it would all be over. Yeah, I thought that was going to be the line at the end of it. I thought we were going to be able to start rebuilding, and we have to a certain extent. But this is going back 3 years now. Over that 3 years, in fact, over the last 19 years, there's not a day gone by where I've not felt guilt and felt failure to protect my babies. The fact that my relationship with Gemma in particular has been damaged because, even today, all these years later, I find it very difficult just to hold her and hug her the way a father should be able to hold and hug his daughter. I couldn't do that for a good few years afterwards because I just felt that it was how do I describe it? It was inappropriate, or would I be raking up uh, emotions in her by having physical contact with her? She's my daughter, for goodness sake. I can give her a kiss and a cuddle any time I like, or she likes. It's not that's a given. That's part of a normal father-daughter relationship. But I lost that. I lost that for years and years. And again, I was blaming myself for that. You know, I put my children in harm's way. I didn't protect them, didn't do my job. Um, and that's, like I say, I thought those feelings would subside after the sentencing and after the justice was served. And even after he died, I thought it would go away, but it didn't, because um, I couldn't I couldn't see what was in front of me. I couldn't see the positives. I couldn't see all of the good things that I had with my family. Um, and I was blind to it, blind through my own guilt and self-pity almost, that I'd failed as a parent. Um, and yeah, that not not nice feelings to have.
Yeah, can only imagine. And so then at the time that was in, I want to say like 2024 when we talked then, kind of like towards the end of 24, I think, when you were
Yeah,
on where you were on
yeah,
TruthWorks.
yeah,
And so, or at the time it was called the Hearing Heart, same. And
yeah.
so like what kind of where were you at the time before you decided to come on? Like or like where kind of like where came the point where you said, okay, let's have a look here a little bit more.
Yeah. Um, it was for me. It came about uh, watching other people in the hot seat, um, and the way you worked with them to. It was almost as though there's a real pattern here, regardless of the situations people found themselves in. The answer was always within, always. Um, and seeing others come to that kind of realization, and with your help and guidance, they were able to see beyond the facade of their problems, their issues, their hurt, their feelings, and whatever was troubling them, and to almost step outside yourself to then go back in again, um, felt quite cathartic to me. And because I'd sat and I'd watched others tell their stories, feel the emotions, feel the emotions with them, empathize with them. And then there was always a point in every session whereby there'd be a moment of realization, a moment of joy almost, seeing somebody wake up to what for them has been torment or whatever the situation, to see actually there's light at the end of the tunnel here. I felt that I really needed something like that. I don't know if you remember that day in particular. Um, Before you even got to the point of saying, "Is there anybody?" Boom, my hand was up, and that was me. I decided wholeheartedly that this was going to be the time when I was going to address 18 years of every single day, never letting myself off the hook, never forgetting what I'd done to my children and the guilt and the um, failure that came with it. That day, or that evening, day for you, evening for me, was pivotal in what then comes after. I've shed a couple of tears tonight, but that session was a wash. Floodgates were open, and I was exhausted by the end of it. And funnily enough, I can barely remember any of it. I couldn't see the strength that I had, um, and the presence of mind to do the right thing by my family rather than for me. Which kind of comes back to what I was saying about my value, if you like, where I felt I had no value because I'd failed. Um, but actually, I guess I probably had more value than I, I initially thought. There was a point that evening where you, here I go again, you reminded me of the love that I had in my life. Um, my family's love for me, my love for my family, the fact that I would fight to my dying breath for them, um, the fact that they know that I would fight to my dying breath for them, which is really important.
Was there anything else that you recall that made a difference for you, or was that kind of like the almost like the linchpin, for lack of better word, where it shifted for you?
That was the undoubted linchpin for
Mm.
me, um, was the fact that actually love is a very underrated and underestimated emotion. Since I was in the hot seat, um, Rachel and I have celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. As cheesy as it sounds, we decided, as a result of Gemma really saying, you should do this. We decided to not renew our vows per se, but to basically stand in front of our nearest and dearest and um, tell each other how we felt about each other, really. There was only Gemma, Angus, and their partners, um, and my sister were the only people that knew what we were going to do for our 30th. All of our guests had no idea. They thought they were just coming for a summer barbecue. I came in, and then Rachel was walked down the sort of aisle that we'd created by my dad, who had no idea until 15 minutes before that he was going to be doing that. So yeah, it all sounds quite cheesy, but again, there wasn't a dry eye in the house because it was so full of emotion because everybody there knew what we'd been through as a family, the kind of hurdles that we've had to go through, the kind of brick walls, the traumas that we've had to face. And before I was in the hot seat, I couldn't even see how, as a result of the negative things that had happened, um, that the light and the good and the positives that come from all of that just comes shining through. But through it all, I've had this unreserved love from my family. Um, and just last night, um, you know, uh, Gemma, her partner, Angus, his partner, the grandchildren, um, my mother-in-law, Rachel, we're all sat round a table having the most amazing home cooked dinner, chatting away, smiling, loving each other, having fun. Um, that's that's not by fluke, I don't think. Um, that's real. That's happened, and after being in the hot seat, I've allowed myself to enjoy that so much more because I I know and I can feel the again, it sounds really corny, doesn't it? But I can feel the love in the room in a way that I couldn't before. It was almost as though before it's like pre-hot seat and post-hot seat. Pre-hot seat, yeah, I'd go through the motions and I'd be a father and a grandfather and a husband, and um, it was all real. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't looking at it from the right angle. Um, so I think, uh, without sounding all melodramatic, I kind of feel as though that was a switch for me that night with you, darling. Um, it it woke me up. It made me realise, whilst nothing's going to change the past, um, and nothing's going to take the hurt away that they've suffered and the trauma that they've suffered and the trauma that we've suffered off the back of it. Um, it woke me up to the fact that there was nothing I could have done to stop it. To me, the true mark of the man that I am now is how I then reacted post disclosure, and everything I'd done from that point forwards was for my family and for my loved ones.
Right. And that was something that you would say was a bit of a kind of bit of a revelation as a
Oh
result.
yeah,
Yeah. Right. So that was kind of like the shift in perspective there.
yeah. That was the day I woke up to the rest of my life, I think. It sounds really dramatic, doesn't it? It sounds like a real thunderbolt, coming out of the heavens or whatever it is up there. Um, you know, um, yeah, struck me and woke me up and told me there's another way. And that way is love. Is yeah. Um,
Wow.
and I remember you sent me the chat
Hmm.
afterwards. Um, but I only read it about 7 weeks ago, 7, 8, maybe 8 weeks ago for the first time. Um, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to read what other people were saying while I was in the hot seat. Um, and a lot of the comments in there were again powerful. But I broke down like a blubbering baby again and went through it all again in my head. Um, but again, it's all just love, 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 love. Um, Everybody else could see it except me. I was blind to it, completely blind, blinded by guilt and failure.
It seems to be more available, or at least women seem to be more willing to, do this type of, inner reflection and kind of deep inner dive to look what's there and kind of the, internal things that have a great hold over how we perceive our life or even our reality, like what you just said before. A small thing, just like one realization can just change everything. Even we can even kind of change the past in the way that we look at it in a different way. It
Yeah,
doesn't make anything undone, but the way that we relate to it just changes and shifts, which then makes our life more beautiful, more joyous, more loving. For the fellow men out there, is there anything that you would want them to know or that you would wish to say to them, how like really taking a bold and taking a courageous look at yourself can really something maybe change something for them?
there's almost a bit of a stigma with men through centuries of programming and um, propaganda, if you like. Men are seen as these strong beings, um, the dominant male, the alpha, the leader of the pack, the breadwinner. All of these labels that we're given. Men don't cry, and then you look at the statistics, um, and the statistics actually say, the suicide rates for men are through the roof, and you have to ask yourself why. Why is that? And it has to be because it's perceived as a weakness to open up and you know be vulnerable. Going on the hot seat that night and entering into a contract, if you like, with you to be vulnerable, to be in a position whereby I knew I was going to tear my heart open and I knew I was going to cry in front of other people, heaven forbid. Um, to know that I was going into this, knowing that I was going to break at some point, happened very early on, sooner rather than later. Um, but once I had broken and once I had shown my vulnerability, all bets were off. it was open season, and I was able to communicate openly, freely, honestly, because I'd broken through that barrier. So if nothing else, I proved to myself that um, I am still a man. That's a real benefit, a real positive in my head. There's no shame. There's nothing bad can happen by opening up and sharing, and only good can come of it. I'm absolutely convinced of that. You know, my problems, if you like, might have seemed absolutely mountainous to me, but there's other people suffering way worse than me. Um, and again, it took that evening for me to realize that if you don't learn to communicate properly, if you don't learn to expose your vulnerable side, there's only one person you're kidding, and that's you. Nobody else is going to think any less of you. Literally nobody that would be of any worth to you in your life would think any less of you, opening up to your own vulnerability and to what's going on in here and in here. Um, no harm can come of that. Surely, surely none.